Hi, my name is Brad, and I'm the pastor at Community Fellowship. Thank you so much for tuning in to this online gathering. What you're going to see today is people worshiping God with great music and listening to teaching from the Bible that will help them live their lives. And we're excited about the fact that you're joining with us in that. If you have any questions, please ask them. If you have statements to make comments. And if you think this could help people around you, share this video so that others may join us. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I'll come back and see you again in the middle and the end of the video. And I want you to understand that these two verses give us the setting in which the story of the prodigal son has its meaning. And if you forget this setting, then the story of the prodigal son really doesn't mean nearly as much as it means because of this. I want you to see this. 2,000 years ago, religious people thought they were better than other people. 2,000 years ago, religious people thought that God cared more about them than other people. 2,000 years ago, Pharisees and scribes, those would be the ones who had succeeded in the religious world. They had climbed to the tops of the ranks. They had been given the titles. They had been given the educational connections. They had achieved all of the goals. They had received the awards. They were the ones with the Sunday school pins, and all the different things, like saying how all the good stuff they had done. They were the ones who had won at the game of religion. They were the winners in every way, and they expected good rabbis like Jesus to be one of them and to hang out with them and to spend time with them and to shun everybody else like they did. And what completely and totally shocked them about Jesus is that he was excited about drawing close to people who were nothing like them. And what we find in this is really the story of the New Testament, which is Jesus ticks off religious people because he loves everybody. That's the story of the New Testament. And it's ultimately the reason why he's crucified from a human perspective. It's why they hated him. And it's why they wanted him to die. Is that he was giving out closeness to God to people who they believed did not deserve it. And 3 stories are told. Now, the first story, one of them, is about a woman who loses coins. And she sweeps her floor and looks throughout the day, hoping to find everything that had been lost. Another story is about a shepherd who loses a sheep. And he leaves the 99 in order to go to the one to find the one lost thing. And the third story is about a dad who has 2 sons, and he loses one of them. And this one isn't just a mishap. It's not an animal wandering off in the woods. It's not someone dropping a handful of change. This one is a loss that comes by choice. Because this son looks his father in the eye and says, I wish you were dead. Because I would rather have what you're going to give me when you die than you. I want my inheritance, and I want it now. I'm going to read to you this story. But I want to make sure that we all get that Jesus is talking to religious people about non-religious people the whole time. This is not a sly little parable in which nobody gets it. And they're all like, whew, missed that. No, this is an in-your-face, absolute, focused parable where Jesus is making it very clear that when I talk about this person, I'm talking about them. And when I talk about this person, I'm talking about you. Okay, it's that clear. And if we don't get that it's that clear and that Jesus has an audience as to who he's talking to and who he's talking about, then we'll miss what's really going on in this story, okay? So let me read to you verse 11 and following. I'm skipping the first 2 short stories. You can go back and read them. It's verse 3 through 10. It's very, very short, 2 stories about lost coins and a lost sheep. But here we go. Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Now understand, this is the equivalent to the younger son saying, I'll be glad when you're dead because I want what you're going to give me, not you. I want my inheritance so I can leave. That's what he's saying. Give me my stuff so I can be gone. Now, even though in this story, the prodigal son's not the villain, you need to understand that everyone hearing Jesus tell it thinks he is. Right now, they're going, that's right. That's the punk. That's the guy I don't like. That's the guy who's wrong. That's the guy who's going to hell right there. That's the hell-bound sinner. Tell the story, Rabbi. That's what's going on in the mind of the religious folk as they talk about the young man who asks his dad for the inheritance. Now, in telling this, I don't want to understate the despicableness of what the young boy's doing. It is horrible. It is horrible that he would look at his father and say, I want my inheritance now. In fact, We might each maybe be taken aback by the thought that sometimes maybe we're a little more prodigal than we realize, because here's what's really happening. In looking at the Father, he's more concerned about what the Father can give him than of actually knowing his dad. We live sometimes in a world where it feels a little bit like, some of you as parents might go, yeah, I get this. Sometimes it feels like somebody might want the stuff you can give them more than you, right? Sometimes it feels that way in a dating relationship. Maybe in a marriage it might come across that way. Sometimes in a parenting relationship it might feel that way. I know that it comes across that way at times in religion, in Christianity, because here's what I see. I watch Christian television, and I don't watch Christian television, by the way, but when I do watch Christian television, I get mad because I'm watching Christian television, and here's what you see. You have a bunch of people going, God's all about your destiny, and he wants to give you all your joy, and he wants to give you all your dreams, and he wants to make sure that you have all this provision, and it sounds like God is a rich dad who, if you'll just do what he says, you'll get inheritance. We use words like he's going to bless you, and it's the favor of the Lord, and all that sounds so like Christian hip and awesome and good, but in the long run, what it produces oftentimes, in a health and wealth kind of gospel way, is a group of kids of God who are more interested in what God has to offer them than who God is. A dad who's nothing but a checkbook. If you've ever had somebody in your life who wanted the stuff you could give them more than they wanted you, then you might know how God must feel when we treat him that way. So this is really what the young son is doing. He says to his dad, the things you can give me are more valuable than you are. I want those things now, and I'm going to leave. Now, interestingly enough, in the story, the dad gives them to him. It says in verse 12, it says that he divides his property between the two sons. So the dad is actually stepping out of ownership. The dad is saying to the younger son, you get to have all this, and to the older son, you get to have all this. I'm out. Okay? That's what the dad says. In verse 13, not many days later, see, it doesn't take long, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered that property with reckless living. So he was kind of new money. You know what I mean? Like he took all of this stuff that his dad had given him that he had never had control of before, and now that he has control over it, he blows it. The biblical word here is squandered. It's not really a word we use really often. He blows it. Okay, that's what he does. In verse 11 it says, in verse 14 it says, and when he had spent everything, a severe famine came across the country. What's interesting is once he needs what his dad gave him, he doesn't have it anymore, right? Like he needs it, but it's gone because he wasted it. So again, you got to hear that these Pharisees are over here thinking, oh my gosh, Jesus is wearing out. He's getting ready to wear these boys out because they're so sinful and they've done so wrong. And I can see all the stuff they've squandered that God gave them. And he's building up the story. And Jesus is it's going to be a zinger. It's like the guy on the front row shouting amen at all the stuff that nobody else understands. Like there's just this, they're expecting from a religious world that this is going to be good. It says this is how bad it got for the young boy. There was a famine. He began to be in need. It's a really good way of saying that he was empty. He was hungry. Now, you and I, maybe somebody in the room may have experienced what it's like. I have been hungry in the sense that I like to eat dinner at 7 and it's 8 and we haven't eaten yet. Like I've been hungry like that. I've been hungry like, okay, I forgot to take my wallet to work and I didn't get to have lunch. So I'm going to have to wait till I get home to have something to eat. I've been hungry like that. I've been hungry like my church decided to have a fast, and so we went a day and we all prayed together and we didn't eat for 24 hours or 48 hours. I've been hungry like that, but I have never been in need. In need means the cupboard is empty and nobody cares. That's what in need means. Like he's empty. So he went and he hired himself out. This is verse 15. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country where he was living, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. That detail is important because this young boy is Jewish. He's Jewish, and feeding pigs would have been not only disgusting to him, but it would have been the breaking of a religious rule for him. He would have been going places his mama and daddy never thought he'd be willing to go, to do things that they never thought he would be willing or need to do. Okay, that's where he's at. And again, can't you hear the Pharisees' anticipation of the fact that Jesus is building up this story to really put down those sinners and tax collectors who are coming close to him? He hired himself out to feed pigs. In verse 16, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So this young man is so low that the slop he's giving the pigs looks good to him. I'm hungry. I raise dogs as a hobby. I feed my dogs good food, like high quality, like good food, like it's good, no grain, like top shelf dog food. I feed good food, but never once have I ever looked at it and thought, I got to try me some upgraded Purina. Man, I've had kids try to eat it, and I watched them because it was funny, but I have never myself tried to eat it. Do you understand how down this young man is? How low he is, that he's eating, that he wants to eat pig slop. He's hungry. And again, you need to understand that the audience Jesus is talking to thought he was about to say, and the young man deserved it, and that's what you get when you do wrong, and that's what you get when you don't do what your Pharisee told you to. See what I'm saying? That's what they're anticipating. It says in verse 17, but when he came to himself, the boy, he said in his own mind, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish, I'm dying here of hunger, and my dad feeds his servants better than I'm feeding or eating. He says, I will arise and I'll go to my father and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Now, I don't know the details here, but in the story, I kind of picture this young man doing what maybe a lot of us have done. We messed up so bad. We've just dropped the ball so bad, jacked up the relationship so bad that we are rehearsing how we are going to try and have our one chance of fixing it. Jotting down what he's going to say, thinking about it, going through it over and over and over. Some of you have done this, right? Write out a text, get ready to send it, and go, wait, I need to reread that. I need to think about it. I'm going to write it differently. Nope, that's not good. I'm going to write it differently. The smiles tell me, yeah, I've done that. Yeah. I'm going to send it to a friend. I'm going to have them read it. I'm going to tell them to edit it for me. Tell me whether or not it's a good idea to send it. Because I don't want to break this. I don't want to hurt this. I don't want to make it worse. I want to try to find a way to make it better. I'm in real trouble here. I got to get this right. He's going through it. Okay, Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. Don't forget to say that. I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm not worthy to be called your son. That's hard to say, but I got to say that because I'm not. Please, Lord, friend, Dad, just give me a job. Let me eat. Like that's what he's doing. He's rehearsing and getting ready for this moment when he's going to beg his dad for a little bit of food and work. And see, you need to understand that everybody hearing Jesus talk at this point thinks, I can't wait to see how the dad shuts him up. I can't wait to see how the dad strikes him down. Boy, keep telling the story, Jesus. This is getting good. I can't wait to see how the dad's going to handle this young punk. But you see, the audience listening to Jesus and the young man in the story have completely forgotten one primary issue. They've completely forgotten what the real love of a father or mother is like. And so we get to see that in the next slide. Get this. It says, the boy arose and he came to his father. Okay, now he's rehearsing, he's ready, he's got his story, he knows his words he's going to say. He's hoping his dad will have a little bit of mercy, just give him a job at the bottom of the totem pole, let him eat something. That's what he's hoping. It says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion, ran and embraced him and kissed him. Guess what? The boy didn't even get to say anything before he's already getting hugged. He didn't even get to say the speech that he had together. And all of a sudden he tries. He's getting hugged. His dad's kissing on him, excited, celebrating. And he starts to say his speech. He goes, the son said, Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. He's trying to get his speech out. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, put shoes on his feet. It's almost like the dad's going, son, shut up. Shut up. I don't care about that. You're home. You're home. He's not a servant. He's not. Put shoes on this boy's feet. Wipe down his face. Give him a ring. Bring his robe. He's here. He's back. Everybody, my son is home. You see, the boy did not anticipate how much his dad loved him. The boy had no clue how much his dad missed him. The boy had no clue how much his father wanted him. And so there was no need for the speech, right? All he needed to do was come back. Now you got to know that the Pharisees right now are going, what? Whoa, time out, pause. What? No, that's not the way my dad would have handled. No, that's not. No, I would have been looking face deep in the mud puddle. That's not, what are you talking about? That is not how we, and all of a sudden, the zinger that they thought was going to come out toward the sinners comes out toward them. He says, bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let's eat and celebrate. Now, the majority of the people in this room, maybe all of us, have never been Jewish. We might not quite understand what a fattened calf is. Let me try to give you a close, similar kind of experience. I'm not much of a hunter. I'm not a great hunter, but when I have the opportunity to harvest some kind of game that's really worth eating, I have a half of a wild hog at home. I've got a couple of deer in the freezer. If Stephanie says to me, hey, let's smoke a ham that I went and got with my own hands, right? Let's do that. Okay, I want you to understand something. That's not going to happen on any old Tuesday Tuesday night when we happen to run out of frozen pizza. We're not going to we'll cook up the ham. No, if we're going to cook the ham that's been in that freezer that we've been storing and waiting and getting ready, we're going to plan that about a month ahead of time. We're going to think about that. We're going to get on people's calendar. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to be invited to our house. We're going to prep the day before. The day before, we're going grocery shopping. We're going to get the right veggies. We're going to get the right sides. We're going to make sure we got the right beverages to go along with all that. We're going to invite the friends. They're all going to come over. My kids are going to try to sneak some of it 3 or 4 hours before they're supposed to eat it. Like, we are going to get excited. This is pumped up. And ultimately, even though the people who are there that day are with us because they love us and they're our friends, bull. They're there because the ham, right? The ham. They're there because of the ham. Now we might do that once, twice, 3 times in a year. You guys might do similar things. Okay, my small group a few weeks ago, we bought a bunch of shrimp and crabs, and we did a crab boil, shrimp boil, and all of a sudden we had the highest attendance in small group history because they all loved us. No, there's the food, like it was a fattened calf, right? We were doing that. You need to understand, this is an animal that had been selected at birth that one day will give its life for a special experience. This calf right here is for when my daughter gets married. This calf right here is for when my son gets, this is for when I have my first grandson. That's this calf, okay? That's what this is for. In our world, okay, things like the $200 bottle of wine that you might have shoved back in the back of your Baptist closet, like there's a time when that's going to be good for something, you know, like that's like there's a reason that's going to come out. Like that's a big celebration. You got to understand that on a whim, this daddy donates the fattened calf to this boy who just got back, who hasn't even gotten to get all the way through his speech yet. You understand how excited this dad is? And do you understand how blown away these Pharisees are going to be at this point? Because this is not the end they were expecting. Oh, but then Jesus gets serious. He says, "For this was my son. He was dead, but he's alive again. He was lost. He's been found." And everyone began to celebrate. Now, he could have stopped right there, and this would still have been one of the greatest stories in literature, in literary history. But he goes on, and considering the audience, I would go so far as to say that the next few verses are ultimately the reason this story was told. You see, there were two sons, and they both had the same problem. They both loved daddy's stuff more than they loved daddy. One of them got it by demanding it and running off and wasting it all. The other one got it by earning it and working hard and proving himself worthy. But they really both wanted daddy's stuff. Now the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. I could make another Baptist joke there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to move on. And he called one of the servants, and he asked one of these servants, these men, he asked him, "What's going on? What does this mean?" Now, it would be my guess that this servant does not like the fact that he's the one who's about to break the news to the older brother. It would be my guess that he probably knows the older brother hates the younger brother. It would be my guess that he is not the one who has to want to tell his boss what's going on. It would be my guess. I don't know that for sure, but it says, and he called one of the servants and asked what was going on. And in verse 27, he said to them, "Your brother has come. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he received him back safe and sound." And the older brother was angry and refused to go in. Do you realize he's talking to the Pharisees, right? He's talking to the people who just griped about the fact that Jesus was eating with the sinners. That's what this story is about. But his older brother threw a temper tantrum and wouldn't even go eat the best food he'd ever had in his life. That's what he's saying. His father came out and encouraged him, entreated him, invited him. "Son, please come back with me. Come see your brother. Come eat with us." But he answered his father and he said, "Look, these many years I've served you. I've never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends." Sounds like Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie. Like, "But I didn't tell you, like he's just whiny. The older brother's like, "Why didn't I didn't get that." But when this son of yours came home, didn't even call him his own brother, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, "Son, you were always with me, and all that is mine is yours." It was fitting to celebrate and to be glad for this brother of yours. He won't let him call him just my son. He calls him your brother. Your brother was dead, but he's alive. He was lost, and he's been found. You guys get what the story's about? When we allow religion to make it look like the successful people get to dislike or look down on those that they deem less successful, then we have completely missed the boat of everything Jesus cares about. And so today I'd like to talk to you, and I say this with humor because it is almost noon, and I usually am done about 10 after, so I'm going to get there in about 10 minutes. But I normally preach 3 points. Today I only have 10. I promise there'll be 10 quickies. First, every success story is ultimately a comeback story. Here's what I mean by that. It's really easy for us as Christians, especially if we were saved at 4 and started teaching Sunday school when we were 8, and joined the choir at 11 and, and like have been, went to church 19 times a week for all of our life and that kind of thing. Like I get, it's easy to go, you know what, I've done this right. I've lived morally. I've made the right choices, married the right girl, married the right boy, did what mama said. I never got in trouble. It's easier for us to go, and now I'm 40-something years old, and I got a great job. My wife loves me. My kids are great. It's easy to kind of think that you're a success story. But if you do that, you're really in danger of becoming a Pharisee. And I speak from personal experience. This is my journey. It's really easy if you think your life is a success story and forget that you're a comeback story, not a success story. It ultimately will change the way you look at other people. Here's what I mean. I was saved at 7. I went into the ministry in high school, right? Like after prom, you know what I did? I went home, said hi to my mom. You know, like that's like I behaved. I didn't do drugs and I didn't drink alcohol, none of that stuff when I was young. And I thought I was just doing good. And then something happened. God started realizing that I needed to go through a boot camp of my own and realize that I'm not nearly as successful as I think I am. Now, I was one of those Christians who thought God was lucky to get me on his team. You know, and it's just so ridiculous. It's why God teaches us that pride is the greatest of the sins. It's the thing that will bring about the biggest fall. And so I'm reminded by him about my life that if it weren't for him, I couldn't have oxygen. If it weren't for him, then my sins, even though I might have personally measured them as less than other people's sins, my sins were horrible, and my successes were filthy rags compared to his holiness. So you and I, we got to remember that every success story is ultimately a comeback story, that we were born in sin, broken and dead, and in Christ we are raised to life and given hope. Okay? That's one. 2, the gospel is all about comeback stories. The gospel's not about go to church when you're little, learn all the right things to do, behave the way you should behave, and God will bless your life because you've been good. That's not the gospel. It's not a bad path, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is every man and woman born into this world deals with the reality of sin in their life. They're broken, they're sinful, and literally spiritually dead. And it's because of Jesus that life gets breathed in to a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 40-year-old who will follow Christ. The gospel is about comeback stories, not about success stories. Number 3, if we value comeback stories, then we will think less about what someone deserves and more about what Christ has done. We'll think less about what someone deserves and more about what Christ has done. And this whole message, you guys, is all about reminding us not to be Pharisees and that we better make sure that we have meals with sinners. That's our goal, and that we are one of the sinners who's eating. That's the reality, is keep that in mind. How do we think about people? How do we treat people? How do we make sure that instead of viewing people from a religious standpoint, we view people from a Jesus standpoint? And we got to think less about what somebody deserves and more about what Christ has done. Now, am I the only one in the room who fights that? Am I the only one in the room who fights knowing that somebody's made horrible decisions, they got DUI and had a wreck, killed somebody, that they left their wife, had an affair, hurt their kids? Am I the only person that doesn't just get furious about that kind of stuff on the inside? And I remember a time in my life when I was so angry toward people who had hurt other people that I remember out loud saying, put him in the chair and I'll flip the switch. I remember saying that about someone who had done something that I deemed so wrong. But if we value comeback stories, you got to change. And that change is a change that allows us to go from focusing on what somebody deserves to focusing on what Christ has done. Because what Christ has done is bring grace and mercy into the life of the worst of sinners, of whom you and I are one. Next, if we value comeback stories, then a person's mistakes will not be the first thing we think about when we think about that person. We live in a small town, so a lot of times we know everything everybody's done and all kinds of stuff. And if you don't watch out, you'll end up thinking, yeah, I know John. John got a DUI the other day. I know John. John's the one who stole money and got fired from the plant, right? And I know John. John's the one whose wife had an affair on him with his best friend from high school. I know that guy. And if you don't watch out, what will end up happening is that you and I will allow ourselves to think about someone's lowest moment as their identifying reality. But if we are a people of comeback stories, then instead of letting someone's worst moments be the first thing that comes to our mind, what we'll actually be thinking about when we think about them is really who they are and all that God's doing in their life. Next, if we value comeback stories, we'll celebrate Jesus' redemption more than a person's success. And this is important, I think, for us to get, is that when you're around a church, you're going to see some people do some really great things. Like Will this morning and his decision to go in the military, and us believing that we're praying, God's leading him to do that, and we're praying for him. And we want to be very, very thankful to Will. But what we don't want to do is simply make it about Will. It's about what God's doing in Will. And if we forget that, what will happen is we'll just become a group of people who congratulate each other when we do well and look down on each other when we don't. Instead of people who celebrate God when God does something great in somebody's life, and who go to God when somebody's really struggling with something in their life. You make sense? You understand what I'm saying? We want to make sure that we value Jesus' redemptive story more than a person's success. If you don't watch out, Christian people will just congratulate other Christian people instead of honoring God when good things happen. We need to worship Jesus because he's what is making great things happen all around us. Number 6, when we value comeback stories, we will want to know the whole person and their story. We'll want to know the whole person and their story, not just what's happening right now, not just what they went through, not just what happened in that bad moment, but we will want to know them. And here's what I find. A lot of times as a pastor, I meet somebody in their worst moment. I meet them because they need marital counseling, or I meet them because their kid has started using drugs, or I meet them because something horrible has happened. They've had a death in their family. And so we meet at a really bad moment. But when I am blessed enough to actually get to know that person and see the beginning and the middle and sometimes toward the end of their life, what I realize is that even those who've had the worst of moments oftentimes have the most beautiful stories. We need to know the whole person and their story if we really value comeback stories. Next, and I'm getting toward the end. If we value comeback stories, then we will honor Jesus by treating people with compassion, acceptance, and truth. And I don't have time to really go through all this, but really here's what I'm saying, is that Jesus treats people this way. Every time you read a story about Jesus talking to an individual, he always starts out with compassion. He sees them with love in their eyes. It doesn't matter if it was the Roman soldier whose daughter has died, or if the woman who's caught in adultery, or whatever. He looks at them with compassion. He draws them close to him, and then he tells them the truth. He says things like, that thing you did was wrong. You should go and not do that anymore. The rich young ruler, he says, you should give away money that you have and care for the poor. So compassion is the way he begins the relationship. Truth is the way he continues it. And we need to make sure that that's how we treat people. I'll deal with that more at another time. Number 8, if we value comeback stories, we'll be open about our own brokenness that became a comeback story. And this is kind of the biggest point of the day, and that's this. I think we fail when we feel like the best thing about ourselves that we get to tell are our biggest successes. So if I meet somebody and they say, hey, tell me about yourself. And I say, well, I got this degree and I got this job and I got this, my wife and kids, and I've been married this long. And I make it sound like I'm just one good decision after the next. Man, that's me. When I do that, I'm poking my chest out. I'm trying to look good. But the reality is, here's what's happened. Christians have made a life of trying to look impressive to those around them. And the problem is that people who are not believers believe us. That they really think that our lives are that awesome. They really think that we've succeeded that many times and no failures. And here's what doesn't happen. What doesn't happen and what should happen is that if we believe in comeback stories, then we're going to be willing to share the parts of our life that we had to come back from. The parts of our life that we had to get through, the parts of our life that without Jesus' grace, we would have died from, would have killed us. I can't really tell all the details of this story, but I was in a situation around the leadership of a church where a man came to the church and said, I have a temptation toward a sin, and I really want to share it with the church and ask the church to pray for me. Now, he had not fallen to the sin. He was just admitting he was tempted to it. And this had led him to a life of celibacy, and he was middle-aged by this time. And the pastor said, nope, you can't share that. We can't let you tell people about that. People won't trust you anymore. They won't like you anymore. They won't treat you nicely anymore. So you don't get to share that. And about a month later, a young man in the church facing the same temptations faltered, fell, and found himself in major trouble. And only a month before, God was leading a man in the church to confess that problem. Can you imagine what might have happened in that young man's life if he had gotten to hear from an adult man that he trusted say, hey, I go through those temptations myself. Here's how I fight them. I need you guys to pray for me. What might have changed in that young man's life? Here's what happens. A young woman comes into a church and she's struggling. She's got all kinds of problems, struggles in the background, and she sits down behind, in front of, and around other ladies who are a part of that church, and she literally thinks those women have never faced what she faced. They haven't been through what I've been through. These ladies, got married when they were 16 and hung out with the same man until they're in their 30s. They had 2 babies, and their babies didn't cry when they were born and didn't even need diapers because their poop doesn't stink, and everything's just fine about these women are perfect. How could I ever measure up to them? And here's what I'm telling you, is we have to be honest about the brokenness in our own life, or we will miss the opportunity that our redemptive story could help somebody else be redeemed. You hearing me? If we value comeback stories, then you got to be open about your brokenness. You got to. 9, if we value comeback stories, then we love people who mess up. And here's what I really mean to say, is that we love people even when they mess up, and that people don't have to cover up their mess up for us to love them. That's what I'm saying. People don't have to cover up their mess up in order for us to love them. And we don't forget that we are one of those people who messed up. That we love people who messed up. And number 10 is this, we will never ever forget that we are messed up people who were trying to live a comeback life. Now, if you're taking notes on the little pieces of paper, it reads wrongly. It says, we will never ever forget that we are messed up people who are lying about a comeback life. Okay, that's funny. That's funny that's the misprint. But that we are trying to live a comeback life, or living a comeback life. Here's what I want to close with. Our perspective about our own life and who we really are in Christ will affect how we see and think about and treat other people. If we have a misunderstood notion that we are Christians because we're good and other people are lost because they're bad, then we will have a completely and totally messed up expression of the gospel, and God will not be able to use us to help anybody. In fact, if nothing else, we might do a lot of harm. But if you and I realize that we are Christ followers because God redeemed us from brokenness, and God healed us of our sin and forgave us of our wrong and blessed us in spite of us, then all of a sudden we might have the appropriate perspective to be able to help somebody else who's down, to be able to help somebody else who's struggling, to be able to help somebody else who feels broken and messed up right now. And that's the reason why this sermon is some very important stuff. Is so that you and I know not just how to relate to God, but how to relate to other people who are trying to meet the God that you already know. Would you pray with me? Lord, I love you so much, and I'm so thankful for you and for the way you've been so good to me. I don't deserve any of the things, Lord, that you've handed my way. I confess publicly that were it not for your grace and your mercy, that I would be nothing but dead, nothing but distant, nothing but broken. But you, Lord, you had grace. You had mercy in my life, and you continue to do so when I make mistakes and do things wrong now. Lord, you're teaching each of us the value of obedience. You're teaching us how to grow and mature. You're teaching us how there are blessings that come from behaving the right way and handling life the right way and treating people the right way. But in the midst of all that, Lord, you're also showing us the reality that grace is real and alive from you. So make us a graceful people, Lord. And as we celebrate you today, I pray that this will be a grace-filled moment for someone. Jesus, I felt all day like there was somebody that needed to hear from you today. And I hope that the words you've spoken through me are helpful, but I know, Lord, that the words your Spirit could speak directly to them right now are far beyond, more important than what I said. So I pray, Lord, that you would speak directly to someone right now, to each of us. Folks, where you are, it might very well be today that you're convicted, feeling a bit like a Pharisee, recognizing that you need to be less concerned about what somebody deserves and more concerned with what God's doing. So let that be your focus. Let that be your prayer response right now. Maybe you're here and you're thinking about some of the people that when you think of them, you always think about that worst thing they did, that thing that they did that hurt you or hurt somebody you love. And right now what you need to do is ask God to give you a redemptive spirit, that you would be able to move a step toward forgiveness, that you would think of that person more as an ongoing story and less as a person who did what they did. and that you would focus less on the person and more on what God is doing and what God is willing to do. So think about that, pray for that now. And maybe that you're here and you felt distant from God, pushed away by the church, unwanted. I pray that today you would see this as a moment to come home. You don't have to prepare a speech for him, folks. You don't have to get ready making sure you say everything just right because he's your Father and he loves you and he wants you in every way and he's ready for you to come home. Would you stand with me as Julie leads us in this song? And I encourage you to respond. If God's leading, grabbing you in a great way and you need to talk to somebody or pray with somebody, then come down here and kneel at the altar. I'll pray with you. We'll grab a church leader to pray with you. If you've got somebody you love and trust here with you, grab them. Say, go with me. Okay? Let's let this be a moment when we respond to the Spirit of God. Worship Him.
There's a calm that covers me when I kneel down at your feet. And it's a place of healing. It's a place where I find freedom. There's a place my your name till the walls come falling down. I've come to worship. I've come to worship. Sing to him this morning. I'm gonna sing my song. I am gonna shout for joy at the mention of your name. I've come to worship. I've come to worship.
Amen. Amen. You guys can grab a seat for just a second. Thank you. What a moment. What a moment. Many churches go years without those kinds of moments. So I'm just thankful to God for moving in us and what he's doing here. And I'll give you a prayer request. I can't give you details, but I've been especially thankful to Jesus today because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to speak this morning. I was really pretty distracted. I have a good friend who has a very, very sick daughter. The doctors are saying that she's not going to live, and she's 9. And I can't really get into the details, but it's far, far away, a long way away from here. But she was on my mind, and I knew that this was an important message. And so some of the guys from the church gathered around me and just asked God to help me forget about that for a moment and just focus on this. And I just really appreciate you guys being so receptive to teaching and listening. And I know when I kind of ad-lib, things get nuts sometimes, but you guys are so wonderful. So I love you. I want to tell you about a couple of things. First, as I mentioned earlier, if you had the handout notes, the 10th one is a misprint, so you want to rewrite that. And I don't want you pulling it out of your Bible in 8 years quoting me, like say that. So your handout that you can grab, if you haven't already grabbed one, both exits will have them. Tells you about all different kinds of things going on. One of the most recent ones is children's camp that comes up here in about 8 days. So want to make sure that you're aware of that. That's a big deal. Last year it was really great. And one of the things I love about this is that we do this in connection with Reedland Baptist Church, which is a real sovereign act of God, because RBC was my first ministry post. I was the youth pastor there, my first ministry position ever, way back in 1993, before a lot of you were born. And then there was a time in the past when it looked like we were going to work together again in a similar situation that didn't work out. And then without me involved at all, like I didn't know about it at all, last year we go to children's camp with Reedland Baptist. Just kind of a cool connection. And so I'm blessed to say that that's a thing that our church is a part of. I don't know how many, like I heard something like 65 kids or something like that. 65, 70 kids, something like that going. That's just 3rd through 6th grade. Like we're talking about a half of an elementary school here. So it's really, really exciting that's happening. And that is, again, July 6th through the 8th. So if you want to connect with that or have any questions, you can go to cfconnect.info, or you could grab one of our leaders in children's ministry and just tell them that you have some way you'd like to help or serve. I do remember that last year, this is where we had like the 150-foot long by 30 feet wide slip and slide, and, had to make a couple of insurance claims, that kind of thing. But it was just a really great time. There's a couple of things you need to know. Today is a gigantic day. It's Light Up the Sky for Christ. That's tonight. Here's what's going down. If you've never been to this before, you're not going to believe me, because I'm a pastor talking, and you're going to think we're going to shoot off a couple bottle rockets and praise Jesus. But this is like one of the coolest fireworks displays I have ever seen. And you're sitting right under it, looking straight up. It's the coolest thing. So we hire a professional fireworks team. They come in, and am I right, you guys? This is it's a big deal. Yeah. So here's what I want to tell you about. It's such a big deal that every year people who don't even know what's going on stop on the 4-lane and get out and watch. It's a big deal. So I want you to understand something, because you're the 11 o'clock crowd, and the 11 o'clock crowd needs to hear this reminder. Don't be late. Because if you're late, you might not have anywhere to park. It goes nuts. So here's what I would encourage you to do. The band that we have coming in is a group of teenagers who rehearse as a band from Allen's Music in Paducah. They are a fantastic band. They have 4 hours of music they could play. We only ask them to bring their best 2 hours. That's what we said. So they're coming from 6 to 8 o'clock. They're going to be playing, they told me, mostly classic rock, okay? So it'll be fun. We come here, some teenagers have a good time. That's going to be in the parking lot. We're giving away, I think we got like 600 or 700 hot dogs, and we have bottles of water that'll be iced down. You're welcome to bring a cooler. If you're not a water drinker, you want to have Diet Coke or whatever, bring a cooler with you. That's fine. You can bring bag chairs. You're going to want something to sit on, and we will keep an area in the parking lot here open where people will kind of gather and collect and sit. And then at 8 o'clock, are they called the Freedom Riders? Is that right? Patriot Guard. Got it right. Freedom Riders is a movie. Has nothing to do with this at all. Patriot Guard, which is a group of guys and gals on motorcycles who are patriotic in a big way. It's a long story to tell you how they came about. But that group is coming here, and they're going to do kind of honoring the veterans thing at 8 o'clock. That's happening right at the but do not show up at 8, because you will have a hard time getting get here earlier than that, okay? So from 6 to 8, we have a band playing, free food, lots of booths that'll be up, and organizations. I think somebody's going to deep fry Oreos, that kind of stuff going on all day. I said it in the early gathering, I said we have bouncers for children. I didn't think I would have to explain it to the 9:15 crowd. I thought they would, get it, but I did. We have those blow-up things that kids get in and dance on, and jump up and down. Not big burly guys who throw out misbehaving children. Okay? There are probably a few of those too, but there will be bouncers for children sometime in between 6 and 8 o'clock. And then at 8 o'clock, there's the veterans service for about 30 minutes. And then at 8:30, our praise team is going to take the stage. And I asked them, I said, you know what? We hear you guys play worship music every week. Could you guys just show us some flair and some personality outside of that genre? So I've seen lots of things that they might do. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they're going to be doing popular music from all over different time frames and things. And then they're going to do maybe 1 or 2 worship songs there toward the end. And then at 9 o'clock, or within 8 or 10 minutes of 9 o'clock, I won't say sharp, somewhere around 9 o'clock, we will set off the fireworks. At 9:30ish, that will be over, and we'll start cleaning up and tearing down. And so if you guys maybe even be willing to stick around, bring a flashlight so you can help do some things. And we're going to have an absolute blast tonight, okay? So if you bought a shirt like this, you're going to want to grab it, and I would suggest you wear it tonight. But if you wear it, please know that you are kind of telling the people who are here that you go to church here, which means you might be someone they could ask a question of, or where can I go to the bathroom, or that kind of thing. So you guys just wear your shirt, be ready to be nice to people, invite your friends, call people, tell them, seriously, you should come. I have not had a single person, and I think I had 30 guests here myself last year. I've not had a single person who came last year not come again this year. Every one of them is coming back because they had such a good time. So I love you guys. I'll see you at 6 o'clock or before. Have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.